So the other set of notes we need to take today is about Bohr and the quantum mechanical model. And so go ahead and take these notes again. Once again, you can use the notes that I provide for you, or you can take your own notes. You might find that sometimes using the notes I provide might be better, especially in information-rich sets of notes. This might actually be one where that might be beneficial to you. But anyway, go ahead and do that. Again, I don't care whether you're using your own notes or whether you're using the notes I provide you. All right, so we just talked a bunch about electromagnetic spectrum, and that's because most of what we know about electrons in the atom comes from knowing about light. And so let's talk about where does that come from. So we're going to begin by talking about emission spectra. So in the early 20th century, what they found was that you could get emission spectra emitted by atoms and molecules. So they were using things that were they were essentially cathode tubes. They had metal on either end. They had a gas inside. This is neon. They ran high voltage electricity through it. And what you got was these colored lights, these cathode rays essentially going through. Okay. For atoms and molecules, what they found out is when they ran light through them, you didn't get all of the colors of the rainbow when you ran this through a prism like you would if you put sunlight through it. If you've ever had a crystal that hangs in a window or something like that, you know that it makes a full spectrum rainbow. When you pass electricity through gases that are elements and then put them through a prism, you don't get all of the colors of the rainbow. You get a specific set of colors, which are known as a line spectrum. And it turns out that every single element has its own unique line spectrum. You might remember doing this in 9th grade science in astronomy, because this is a way that we figure out what kinds of elements are in the stars. Right, so scientists wonder where are these spectra lines coming from? And a scientist by the name of Niels Bohr came up with the first idea to help explain this. And basically what Bohr said is he said, Planck was talking about these quanta of energy, these little packets of energy, that you can have steps of energy, but you can't have continuous energy. And so what he said is, when we talk about atoms going around the nucleus, they can only occupy certain orbits corresponding to certain energies. So this might be a lower energy, higher energy, higher energy, higher energy still. However, those are the only places that the electrons can be. They're only permitted in those allowed energy levels. They will not exist at the energies that are not within these levels. Only those specific quanta of energy is permitted. And thus, energy is only absorbed or emitted in such a way as to move the electron from one allowed energy state to another. And that energy is defined by our energy equation from Einstein that we came up with. All right. So essentially, if I am an electron and I'm here and I want to go to there, I can only move by absorbing this amount of energy. Or if I want to move from here to there, I can only move by absorbing that amount of energy, those specific amounts of energy. Likewise, when I come back down, I release energy only in those specific amounts. Well, we know that those specific amounts of energy correspond to a wavelength or a frequency of light. That's where the lines come from. Only the specific jumps that are allowed give off the energy that corresponds to the specific colors of light. In your book, you will see a conversation about something called the Rydberg equation. We don't care about that. You can skip through that. So that then brings us to Bohr's model. Okay, so if we put it together, oftentimes called the planetary model, things that are carried over from what we know before. Bohr said atoms have tiny, heavy, positive nuclei. They're mostly empty space, but the tiny electrons are actually out in the empty space, existing in specific orbits, which is where we get planetary model from. The bigger the orbit, the more energy it has. Electrons absorb and release energy jumping between orbits. The size of their jumps determines the amount of energy and the color of light they give off. So again, an electron might absorb some energy, pop up one level, when it comes back down, it gives that energy back off as a photon. And energy is related to specific wavelengths and frequencies, so it has to be a specific color. And that's where the lines come from. All right, so that got us going down this idea of energy is quantized or quantum things having to do with atoms. Around the same time, another scientist by the name of Louis de Broglie comes up with this idea, and he says, if light behaves like matter, where it has specific energies it can have, and it's going to be related to little particles like electrons, then matter should exhibit wave particle properties as well. And through a lot of work, he demonstrated that there is a relationship between something that is matter and a wavelength that it might have. And that relationship is that the wavelength of matter is equal to Planck's constant divided by the mass of the object times its speed. Okay, so that means you and I have wavelengths when we move around. But you'll notice that compared to like an electron, for example, our mass is huge. And compared to an electron, our velocity is really slow. Okay, so more so because the mass over here, when we start moving around, we don't see our wavelengths, because if I divide Planck's constant by our masses, that gets us a wavelength that's really, 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 really small, and we can't actually even see it. Okay. On top of this then, Heisenberg comes along and he takes this idea one step further. And he says the more precisely we know the momentum of a particle, the less precisely we'll know its position. All right? And in many cases, our uncertainty about the whereabouts of an electron is greater than the size of an atom itself, because even electrons are big enough that the wavelengths that they can give off that we can detect bigger than cause them to be have uncertainty greater than the size of the atom itself. So that brings us to limitations on the Bohr model. Okay, first of all, very quickly they found out that in terms of explaining lines, he could only make the math work to come up with the lines or to explain the lines in hydrogen, the most simple atom with only one electron. As soon as you add another electron, like in helium, the math broke down and he couldn't explain the specific colors that he was giving, or that it was giving off. Secondly, if an electron is circling around and it's negative, and the nucleus is positive in the middle, what should happen in classical physics is that over time, that electron should spiral in toward the nucleus. Well, that doesn't happen. The electrons stay in their orbits. They don't change their orbits. They're right there. And so therefore, it couldn't explain that. And last, if we assume that electrons are particles, that then means that, according to de Broglie, they have some wave properties. And Bohr's model doesn't help explain that wave movement at all. Therefore, it's violating the uncertainty principle. So we need something new. And that something new is defined by something known as the Schrödinger wave equation. Okay? In the mid-1900s, Erwin Schrödinger comes along and he starts doing some fancy math, and he says, you know what? Heisenberg's right. We can't know the exact position of an electron if we know how fast it's moving, but we can have an idea about regions around the nucleus where we're probably going to find an electron. We can't know its exact location, but we do have regions of probability of where we're likely to find those. And those regions are defined by the Schrödinger wave equation. You think of it this way, much like if you're graphing on your graphing calculator a simple parabolic equation or something like that, right? It maps it out based on math. Well, if you take the square of the results of Schrödinger's wave equation, you get a density map that's shows the likelihood of an electron being in a particular place at any one point in time. And it turns out that these density maps are pretty regular. They form very nice regions that are well defined in terms of where those electrons might be found. All right, so we're going to talk about those regions, and it's important for you to know at this point, you need to be able to describe the quantum atom, but you do not need to know quantum numbers. So again, in the book, it'll go through a detailed discussion of the different quantum numbers. That is not required or necessary for you to know for AP Chem or the AP Chem test, or really for any chemistry for that matter. Shh, physical chemists might yell at me for saying that. All right, so let's describe the quantum model. Okay, so same deal as before. We got a tiny nucleus, we got empty spaces, but instead of being in orbits around the nucleus, we now have electrons that are in specific regions. Those regions can be categorized. They can be categorized into energy levels, sublevels, and orbitals. Okay, they're defined by the Schrödinger equation. There are 7 energy levels overall. They tell us the size of the orbital. As we get to a higher energy level, the orbitals get bigger and farther from the nucleus. So you can think of those as like being the levels in a theater. Okay. Each energy level is made of different sublevels. The sublevels come in 4 different shapes, which we call S, P, D, and F. So you could think of those as being like the sections of a theater. Okay. Each of those sublevels has a different number of orbitals in it. You can think of that as being like the rows in the theater. And last but not least, each orbital can hold 2 electrons. That's it. So that's like each row in the theater only having 2 seats in it. Kind of a crazy theater. Okay. So when we think about this, then we can start mapping and figuring out where electrons are in a particular atom. Let's get a little bit more detail on these sublevels and levels. All right, so I said we have 4 sublevels, S, P, D, and F. Turns out that the first energy level only has an S, the second has an S and a P, the third has an S, a P, a D, and the fourth and the rest, 5th and 6th and 7th, all have S, P, D, and F sublevels. And so let's talk about these sublevels for a second. S sublevels have 1 orbital. And as we said on the previous page, orbitals hold 2 electrons, so that means an S sublevel will hold 2 electrons. The shape of an S sublevel is a sphere, which you need to know. Okay, and so you can think of it like that. So this is a map, a sphere around the nucleus where we're likely to find, which is a region where we're likely to find an electron in this sublevel. So you can sort of think like this. The 1s, the S in this sublevel in the first energy level is just a small sphere. In the second energy level, there's the small sphere that's the 1s, and around it, there's a bigger sphere, the 2s. And continuing out, 3s is an even bigger sphere around the other 2. Second kind of sublevel is a p sublevel. P sublevels are made up of 3 orbitals. Okay, since it's got 3 orbitals, that means it can hold 6 electrons. And overall, that means that the shape of them are propellers. So you can think of these as being a front-back propeller, a left-right propeller, and an up-down propeller. Each of those holding 2 electrons. So when you put them all together, you sort of get something that looks like that holds 6 electrons all together. So once again, here are p orbitals. Here's an up-down in the y direction. That holds 2 electrons. Left, right here in the x direction, that would hold 2 electrons. Front, back here in the z direction, that holds 2 electrons. And so when you put it all together, here's the nucleus in the middle, and here's the cloud, the regions of probability, where we might find those 6 electrons in the p sublevel. The d sublevel has 5 orbitals, which means that it holds 10 electrons. And I like to think of the shape of these ones as being difficult with a donut. So here they are. Here's one region. Again, this is going to hold 2 electrons. 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 And this one with the donut is also going to hold 2 electrons. So again, mush them all together with a nucleus in the middle, and you'll have a region that will hold 10 electrons that all goes together there. And last but not least, we have F sublevels. They have 7 orbitals, which hold 14 electrons altogether. And the shape of these, we just call it the F in difficult, right? So S's are shaped like spheres. P's are shaped like propellers. D's are difficult to remember, but they have a donut in them. And then the F's, let's not even worry about them. They're just F in difficult. That could be frogging, flipping, however you want to fill in your F. So again, here are the regions in the F sublevels. Okay, so here's the first orbital. It holds 2 electrons. Second orbital holds 2. Third holds 2. 2 electrons, 2 electrons, 2 electrons, 2 electrons. So again, if you mush them all together with the nucleus in the middle, F sublevel can hold up to 14 electrons. So here's a map of all of our different sublevels together, right? Here's our S sphere, 1 orbital that holds 2 electrons. Our P propellers, 3 orbitals that hold 6. D orbitals hold 10. F orbitals hold 14 altogether, 2 electrons per orbital. So always good to remember that the energy level tells us the size of the orbital, whereas the sublevel, the letter, tells us the shape. When you put all of these together on top of them, the spheres and the propellers and whatever else with the nucleus in the middle, what you end up with is this sort of weird shape that kind of looks like a cloud, which is where, if you've ever heard people refer to the atom as an electron cloud, that's where we get that idea from. All right, so one last idea in quantum mechanics is an idea of spin. In the 1920s, it was discovered that 2 electrons in the same orbital don't have the exact same energy. They're slightly apart. And so how they describe this, or how they explain this, is that they found out that these atoms are actually, or electrons are actually spinning in opposite directions. Because they're negative, that creates a magnetic field and affects their energy a little tiny bit. So that difference we refer to as spin. It describes the energy of the magnetic fields of the electrons, which affects its energy. And even though it's shown here as sort of like spinning in one direction and spinning in the other direction, it's not actually a spin. It's other aspects of the electron that cause the magnetic fields to be slightly different, but they're opposite of each other. So from this comes the Pauli exclusion principle, which basically says that you can have no 2 atoms with the exact same energy. Even if they're in the same energy level, the same sublevel, and the same orbital within that sublevel, within the orbital you've got one spins one way, one spins the other way, giving them slightly different energies. And so no 2 atoms in an electron, no 2 electrons in the same atom have the same energy. Okay? So therefore, no 2 electrons have the exact same sets of quantum numbers.